So, I mean, if we haven't got any questions to start us off, I've...
It's a question for the government. If LINX established an exchange in Scotland, would you consider making public peering at an exchange, not saying which exchange, a requirement for anyone bidding for tenders that the government put out?
That's a difficult question and probably one I can't answer right now.
I asked Colin that question on the phone the other day. I see he's not here now, but he refused to say yes, certainly.
I don't think that's a question that one single person from government can answer right at this minute in time. It would need possibly consultation across a wider audience than that.
Would you consider it then?
Certainly consider it, yes, absolutely.
And a good lawyer.
I wanted to find out from Charlie, because you've done obviously a huge amount of research there into the data centres, and as John said, some of the obvious choices are where all the carriers are. But as John also said in his presentation, it's about having the local community to take ownership of this. So have you got any understanding of the networks that are in those buildings? So where are the ASs? Because you might have a huge facility with great power, but there's only a couple of people in there. Again, it doesn't have the community.
Yeah, the biggest density, it's a bit of a shame that the biggest density is in Skolocate. And if you're just looking solely at people who operate AS numbers, networks that could peer, not to say that there isn't an environment where an exchange might bring people to the conclusion that they need to get an AS number and peer, but actually, if you're just looking at the existing market of people out there who have an AS number and peer, unless they have gone to great lengths to bring their network into their city of choice, for example, IFB and Amor up in Aberdeen, there's not really going to be anyone else there with an AS number who can peer. Skolocate has a reasonably healthy number of people with AS numbers, members of LINX, members of various other people, some people who just have an AS number and take transit from one provider, just for the sake of it. There's a number of those guys in Skolocate. There's a couple in Glasgow in Iomart. One of the useful resources here was Peering DB. When I went to look around what was going on, there's various data centers listed with one member, and that's the owner of the owner of the data center. There's a lot of people who may not list, but actually it's a good indication that the greatest density is in Skolocate, and there's only half a dozen of people who've listed in Skolocate, and there's a couple of people in Iomart. And other than that, it's the data center operators themselves who are in their data centers. What I mentioned on my slides was the fiber operators there. If you were serious about running a network in Aberdeen or Dundee or all these places, and you didn't like the idea of buying from the data center operator themselves, yeah, there's guys with fiber in the building. BT are pretty much everywhere. In Scotland, Cable and Wireless have reasonably good footprint. Bit of dubiety over their reliability, but I believe they're resolving that. And Virgin are reasonably well equipped across the central belt. So if you had an inclination to go into one of these data centers and you put your back into it, yeah, you can get connectivity from anyone. The market for transit providers is a little less exciting, and the market for peering is non-existent. We peer with Onyx, for example, and we had to run a private cable across Skolocate because we had a mutual customer, and we had to do that at our expense, because there wasn't an exchange.
Yeah, and what about the distances between? So in London, John talked about in 2008 we moved out to 2 new POPs, and I think we saw from Andrew's presentation that we're out as far as Slough. So from Docklands to Slough is sort of 40 kilometre, maybe 60 kilometre run. So
I have absolutely no idea about actual distances, but I do have an idea about latency. Does that tell you something? So if you're taking an optical circuit from Edinburgh to London, you, if you're lucky, get 8 or 9 milliseconds. Between Edinburgh and Glasgow, you should get between 1 and 2. Aberdeen down to Edinburgh is about 3. Inverness, I don't know, but I suspect about the same down to the Central Belt. So it's all very close in terms of milliseconds. We're sort of under 4 milliseconds to get anywhere to anywhere in terms of major cities in Scotland.
Yeah, so it's at least half
perfectly
of
viable for running an exchange across the country.
Yeah, so twice the speed as to London, sometimes 4 times the speed.
Yeah.
Yeah. Any more questions from the room at the moment? Brandon.
It's not so much a question, more just contributing to it. It's Brandon Butterworth, BBC. I think people shouldn't get too hung up on where we are now and where we might be, because you can't actually know where you're going to get to. So when I put the BBC on the internet originally, we didn't have any idea we were doing iPlayer, but some of the things we did along the way made it possible to do that. And one of it was, originally we couldn't join LINX because it was a closed club. First we had to get LINX to open up so that we could join LINX, so we can actually use a decent amount of bandwidth and get it to people. And there's quite a lot of steps between that first joining and getting the BBC on the internet and being able to do the things we do today. And you have to actually just get on that journey and start doing it. And I think with the model in Scotland, it may be slightly different. You don't necessarily need to recreate London. If the model is that there's lots of private data centres, then the answer is why not connect them all together rather than trying to pretend there has to be one super centre and everyone has to be in it. Particularly if you've invested lots in fibre, what you need is for it not to be locked up by incumbent operators. You need an open access model for that stuff. And if you have an open access model, people can start building the business around it. And you can then link all these data centres. If you're going to put all fibre in, get all those data centres connected, let people start building business around them. And the reason we've been pushing LINX for years to be more regional is we're on a process of moving the BBC to be internet-based. There's no secret of we're under pressure on spectrum. We're having to hand over to mobile operators increasingly, and new services require more bandwidth. You've got 4K TV and things coming up. And part of that is the world is different. The BBC was there with radio, it was there to make TV, and we haven't really figured out what the internet is yet. It's not really even made the colour TV stage of development. A few websites is obviously not the answer. And there's quite a lot of things we're doing to move the entire broadcast chain from something that's based on traditional broadcast technologies into something that's IP end-to-end, all the way from the cameras in the studios, wherever they may be, because they won't necessarily be in the old traditional places. They may be scattered all over Scotland or over the entire country. That chain, all the way from the point of creation to the end consumer, is going to be IP, and there's going to need to be lots of it. And what we need to do is make sure there's no single points of failure, because nobody wants a national TV channel or whatever to go off. There will be many of those channels in the future. They're not all going to build traditional broadcast services. It's all going to be IP. What you want is a model that these things can actually start to exist. And we can't describe what they are now because we just don't know. What we're doing is building some of the precursors for those things to exist. And I think this is one of the things that you have to take on trust, that you're probably going to need some way of connecting these things together. Just don't sweat the details of how it's going to be done at this moment, but start working towards figuring out what they are.
Yeah.
Thanks, Brandon. That was a fantastic contribution.
Sorry, a bit long.
I think that was kind of mind expanding, wasn't it? Because what that says is that whatever plan we might develop in the short term, we better be agile enough to be different in the longer term. There's a famous quote from Vint Cerf where he said, we haven't yet invented 99% of the uses of the internet, and that's pretty mind expanding if you start to think about that too. I mean, I think I agree with everything you've said, and you said some things that politically are more difficult for me to say. LINX tries very hard not to get involved in telco regulation in the UK. We've always considered that to be a sort of massive stress zone for us, because we've got so many telcos within LINX. If we tried to get into those sort of politics and form views about those things, there'd be a tendency just to sort of tear ourselves apart. So we deliberately stay away from that. But some of the things you said there are rather interesting from that perspective. I think that I just want to emphasise again what I said from the platform, that it clearly won't be enough just to start and be in one place. I think that no one will be satisfied if that is the outcome of today and this initiative. But let's be practical. If we were to start out with the grand vision of saying let's build a meshed internet exchange across 6 or 7 sites, because there were 6 or 7 quite big ones on that list that Charlie took us through, you'd be talking about a project of quite substantial cost and risk. And you may then end up feeling rather dissatisfied that you did something on the basis that you start and people will flow. I think it's important, though, to pick up Brandon's point that if we just build something that is in one place, then we are massively enfranchising the operator of that place. And I know from Paulson's standpoint, and I hope Steve doesn't mind me speaking for them in this respect, they've said loudly and clearly that they intend to operate Scolocate in a carrier-neutral way. They actually have a massive range of carriers that are there already. So I think it is consistent with the stance they're already taking about their own building. And in terms of stats, I listed 150,000 square feet from, did you add it up when you?
I haven't, no, but it's probably better.
And half of that was in one place.
Yeah.
So it still seems to me that it rather points to the fact that there is an obvious place to start, as long as everyone takes the assurance that won't be the end of it.
Yeah,
No.
sorry, I didn't mean to say this, you shouldn't use Paulsons or anything. It's about actually you've got a country where you've got a clean slate.
Yeah.
Let's not build another London.
Yeah.
You see what I mean? And one
The
part,
investment potential is staggering, isn't it?
yeah, and it's so spread out that actually you want to come up with a different model that can actually make the whole of the country participate in it rather than just one little ring of M25. I think that's a big opportunity you've got if you're investing in fibre infrastructure around the country, is learn from the mistakes of other people. Well, not learn such mistakes, but learn from what people have done and try and figure out what comes next. And one key bit of that is fibre taxed in Scotland in the same way it is in the rest of the country? You might want to change that. Because it's really crazy to tax the things that people use to make new things. It's better to tax the profits of making the new things because it encourages them to make the new things. There's a huge overhead in the fibre rates and things that just is a big damper on everything.
I think, Brandon, you're going to end up the hero of this meeting. Carry on with this. Can I just pick up quickly from that, and then Martin, you come in. I mean, I think we already made the point in private beforehand, and again, I said before, LINX is a political animal. It does get involved in protecting the interests of our members, with the caveat I just gave about not getting involved in telco regulation. If you take another example of this, which is very important, down south, frankly, government and local government is completely hostile to data centres. They do their damnedest to mess them up, to stop them from starting, and to make it difficult for them to get planning permission and to do all the things that data centres inevitably have to do. I hear horror stories that you're talking about sometimes an 8-year lead time to actually plan a place and bring it to fruition, just because government and local government seems to conspire to mess it up. And I think there's a fantastic opportunity in Scotland not to be like that, because it doesn't make any sense. Now, why do they do that? Why are they so, I'll say it, why are they so stupid? It's because they've got data centres branded as dirty, power hungry, not employing, horror stories that not in my backyard. And they could not be further from the truth. The data centres themselves are striving massively to become more power efficient. You heard a little bit of that leaked out from what Charlie said about these innovations in cooling and so on. There's masses going on in that space at the moment. It actually is an employer. It's just difficult to see because they don't necessarily work in that building. They're in this surrounding structure that gets enabled because the data center is there. And so this idea that you should be data center hostile, honestly, the UK is screwed if we carry on with policies like that. And you may quote me, So I think if we're into a zone now that Brandon's opened up about how, what could be done from a government perspective to make this, to make Digital Scotland and this initiative more likely to succeed, then, listen to what this audience has to say. Sorry, Martin.
Yeah, I was going to bring it back on track. Don't get rid of that microphone yet, Brandon. But you've just commented about, I didn't talk about our whole company. We run a data center business as well. It's a very profitable business to be in.
business opportunity in Scotland.
Well, we run 206,000 square feet is our biggest data center in California. and we don't have a problem with planning. And we don't have a problem for, you want to see you want to see generators? Well, I'll show you generators. We got 14 generator pads pre-done through planning, which included all the air quality issues. And we're in California, and they do give a damn about air quality there. But the point that I was going to make is, if you count the number of cars in our parking lot, not a lot. If you count the amount of people that are employed by, thousands of customers that have cabinets and are well, we're California, we're the Bay Area, it's very entrepreneurial, then I think the number is massive. And we can't take credit for all of that, but we can definitely, and by the way, companies like us. So building big, by the way, and the other last part is building big in data centers actually becomes way more both unit price efficient and environmentally efficient as well. Small data centers are hard to do. I can explain what PUE is to you later. Now down to what I was, before I was so rudely interrupted, taken off track, what I was going to ask. Brandon, this is a leading question because I think I know the answer to it, but you have the ability to, you should have the ability, like others like you around the world, to measure the, and I'll use the lowercase version of the word, quality of your delivered bits, whether it be iPlayer or even just a BBC News website, to end users. Now, discount people like myself that are end users of BBC News website from around the world, but take iPlayer as in the UK, which is where it's specifically delivered. Do users, just the population of 5 million in Scotland, get a different experience than the Greater London or the southern counties or the rest of England? And to follow on through, you were listed on the Manchester slide. Will BBC's deployment to Manchester make a difference to the, again, lowercase quality of the user experience to users within inside the greater Manchester area or even into the north of that? So you do measurements, and I'm wondering whether you actually have some real numbers that show value in building exchanges and exchanges with deployments such as the BBC or, well, who else did you have listed? Akamai, Netflix? Yeah, that class of customer, that class of content.
Yeah, so we do have stats, and actually we made a nice portal to show by ISP the quality of the service delivered to them, but politics prevents us making it public.
You're amongst friends.
Yeah. But I mean, one of the things is it's actually not by region, it's by ISP, because we don't have a lot of visibility inside people's networks to know where those people are inside it, because it all comes through London. So one of the things, and we do in talking to the major ISPs, are interested in us delivering more regionally or more deeply within their networks, as all CDNs do. And our aim in doing it is not so much, the quality is one aspect of it. So the real questions are, what is the constraint on quality? Because last mile is getting better in a lot of places. BT are doing fibres of the cabinet and things. But the backhaul is still pretty expensive if you buy off BT wholesale. And that is a limitation. If you're paying BT, whatever, 40 quid a meg, and you're selling 100 meg to a home for 40 quid a month, it's a bit of a no-brainer to figure you're not going to get 100 meg continuous for a month, so we're not going to be able to put super high vision into your home, which is we did for the Olympics, which was 350 megabit stream for the 8K resolution. And you can see where the technology is going. We can actually create, and we shipped to 3 places in the UK, Glasgow, did in London and Bradford, and to NBC in the States and to Japan, that 350 megabit stream across the internet. And it's possible in some places. The question is when the technology and mostly the economics make it possible to deliver lots of people all over the country. So yeah, we have stats, not by location, but we know that those things will happen because we already do it with CDNs, that the quality will get better for people, but the ultimate moderator of it is the cost of backhaul for the broadband providers when they choose how much bandwidth they want to let a user use, and it's usually a lot less than the tail. An example actually is worth thinking through is, look how much broadband costs now. It's actually really cheap. And that's because people now in the rush to the bottom of who can provide the cheapest broadband, and that has natural implications on how much of it people can get. The market hasn't settled into a sensible pricing model that says, actually, you're going to want to use a fair bit of it. Here's a fair price for it. Now you can use it. And that's the biggest issue with quality and things. People are still putting money into managing people's traffic because they're trying to manage the cost down rather than provide a good service for a sensible amount of money.
I think, so there's two questions, maybe one statement, I'll let you decide. Is there any proof that regional peering exchanges that then attract big footprint data centres from the likes of Amazon and Facebook or the big global apps providers and software providers and cloud providers displace the indigenous businesses in that region? Because that would be a concern, that we improve connectivity in this country to the point that somebody comes and puts a flag in the sand as a global data centre, which is the wrong thing to do for Scottish Government. You know, it should be about supporting small to medium business and indigenous business before it's attracting internationalisation. So I don't know if that's a question or a statement. And then secondly, the supporting factor with broadband, that guys who are creating the content and at the internet peering point or the exchange point, we should be using smarter technologies to make the most of the connectivity we have, rather than drumming on about 100 meg to the house, which is not a realistic network. You know, it doesn't work. Even when you have the potential to do it, it falls on its backside. So does a regional peering exchange help with that when you've got localised content as well? Because in the UK, this time last year, around about the Olympics, Dido Harding from TalkTalk, CEO of TalkTalk, she put up some great metrics. We've got the best expectation in service delivery, or measurables in service delivery and cost per megabit for broadband in Western Europe. But that doesn't get talked up enough because we've got 10% of the population and maybe doesn't get 2 meg. So I'm all for that. So part of it is content management, speed management, network management. Do we see that the internet exchange maybe has a part to play in that with content providers, rather than just talking about more broadband more of the time, or more bandwidth more of the time?
Let me pick up my bit first, because mine's quite simple. I think as far as your question about whether or not an internet exchange would attract an enormous monolithic data center provider to come, I don't think there's any evidence of that at all. I think if you look at how they make their decisions about that, the hugest content operators like Facebook and so on, they're tending to go to places where they can get very cheap, stroke-free power, because they go next to hydro dams and things. And I gather Facebook have just built out in Luleå in Sweden, which, if you look it up on the map, is right next to the Arctic Circle. And why have they done that? It's the same reasons that Charlie mentioned. So I don't think there's any evidence of that. The Netflix, for example, has 26 10 gig ports at LINX. So if you're sort of moving on, do big content providers see the opportunity provided by internet exchanges to touch lots of networks, in addition to whatever they're doing in net with the big access providers? Of course they do, because it gives them the opportunity to sweep up the long tail. So I think we'll see more and more of that. Netflix didn't do that until they came to LINX. We were the very first place where they tried that approach. But of course it was only the same as Akamai and Limelight and others had done for many years. They just reinvented themselves as a sort of CDN for their own purposes. So that probably makes a significant difference to people's broadband experience. But I think your other questions were more aimed probably at Trudy and are to do with public policy on broadband, which is not our area at all. Is that fair?
Yeah, absolutely. Thank you.
Sorry to leave you with the with the baby.
I mean, yeah, in terms of infrastructure and what's being rolled out just now, I guess at the moment, again, not to not answer your question, at the moment we are investing in infrastructure, but we don't yet know the exact rollout plan. So I think it's something that we would need to work very closely together to ensure that what we're investing in is absolutely aligned to whatever the internet exchange and where that may be as well.
Can I just, I'll give you one quick example. Sweden has an internet exchange in Stockholm, significant internet exchange, and an operator that runs 5, maybe 6, at least 5 other locations, including, let's say, Malmö, which is right across the bridge from Copenhagen, and a significant fiber path. The Malmo exchange, I think, between Malmo and Gothenburg is the biggest of the non-Stockholm exchanges. But they're tiny in comparison of the amount of bandwidth that runs through Stockholm. The international data center players that have come in and invested have definitely invested in Stockholm. Their marketplace makes sense. Malmo, Gothenburg are both sitting with local players. The marketplace is not big enough to entice the global players to come in there. But the opposite of all this statement is that those exchanges, the 5 of them that exist outside of Stockholm, are absolutely vital to make the internet, which is a very integral part of life in actually all the Nordic countries, but in this case, Stockholm. They'd never ever conceive of turning them down, even though I think the ratio of traffic between a Malmo and a Stockholm is quite dramatic. Stockholm is an international location. Malmo definitely covers more of the localized environment. So this is a thing to keep in mind here. And I think somebody made the comment, "Don't replicate London." And I think actually this is another one of those metrics that you want to look at that's important. There was something on your slides, John, that you were dancing around and having a hard time explaining, but I think I can explain very well. You talked about this whole thing about keeping traffic local. And a large amount of your traffic is not local. Everything from, Iceland to Malaysia to the US to wherever, South Africa. A big hunk of LINX's traffic is players like ourselves. So we're bringing traffic in from the United States, bringing it to London, because that's where we can interconnect with Telenor out of Norway, or the guys out of Iceland, or the networks like IS out of South Africa. LINX is the natural place to interconnect. So don't knock your head too much on the local part, because a percentage of the work that LINX does, in fact, actually satisfies a global community, which, by the way, unbelievably benefits the UK. The example you gave, that you can interconnect with all those. There really are two sides to the story. So you focus on the local stuff, and that's where you look at where Scotland can play in this, and where Manchester has already proven, even though it's very early, it's only a year into the game. But you were dancing around this sort of use of the word local when you had all these international players, but in fact, actually, there's another side to LINX for us. It's unbelievably valuable as a global player.
I'm quickly commenting on that. We actually asked the Swedish guys to come and talk to us about their experience, because they set up exchanges around Sweden very early. Actually, what they said was that it's a good model. We like it. We're definitely taking a note of and inspiration from what they've done. But what they said to us was, we did this very early. In fact, we actually did it too early. So decisions were made about places way before content became king as it is today. And so it was sort of an architecture that was born out of a day when access providers still really ruled the roost, and content was completely subservient, and that's not our situation today. So although I think we take some inspiration from that model in Sweden, there are significant differences. Scotland is on its own about a third of the size of the whole of Sweden, and again, going back to my point about why we've set off on this local peering initiative, we are definitely different in that regard, and there's something not right about that. So I'm still personally convinced that there is a good, strong business case to build here. Can I ask you? Sorry, I don't know your name. You were expressing what I saw as scepticism about whether I'd made a sufficiently strong business case. Could you?
Behind.
No, sorry.
Yeah, hi, I'm Patrick Haynes. So you asked the question, should we host it in Skolocate? I can't see any business case posting a Skolocate unless you determine there is a business case to have an IX.
Yeah, okay.
So that wasn't a skepticism. You were looking for contributions from the floor. Unless we determine there's a benefit having an IX, then it doesn't matter where you locate it.
Yeah.
While I've got the microphone, why is carrier neutrality so important?
Okay. Oh, I'm sorry.
I'm asking that for others as well.
Yeah. No. No, it's
Charlie had a very good presentation, but
I'm going to say this.
Charlie.
I'm going to say this with Karen to my right for a very good reason. One of the most important aspects of why the internet has been successful around the world has been the creation of facilities. And I'm going to be careful because I don't only mean data centers. In some cases, I mean what are euphemistically called telecom hotels, which are in no way data centers, that have become carrier-neutral locations in places such as Hong Kong or London or Frankfurt or New York City or Los Angeles. And a carrier-neutral facility means that the landlord, very simplistic definition, data centers don't like to be called landlords, but I'm going to use that phrase, is not in the same game as the tenants. Therefore, I'm not competing against my landlord. When I put a rack of equipment or racks of equipment in, and I ask my landlord for an interconnect to another player, the landlord doesn't say, ooh, so yeah, it's on the price list, it's going to cost X hundreds of pounds or dollars or yens or whatever to go between this rack and that rack. But it won't affect my business. In fact, it's in positive, it's part of my business. If I'm inside a carrier, a facility that runs a network, that operator that I am dependent on to run many, and I'll give a stat in a moment, many cross connects, that landlord is liable to say, ooh, this may not be good for my business. I'll take my time in running that cross connect, or I'll not have another cabinet available, or I will not have enough power for that particular player. The neutrality is absolutely required and has been what has fueled this up and to the right growth of the internet and then some. And the buildings, the carrier neutral buildings, of which we talk about, Telehouse in London, Telecity Interaction, Equinix, all of these are big names. But even in small companies, the carrier neutral aspect is near on number one on the list of requirements to bring a network in from a player like ourselves. I'm not taking away from reliability, cost, or anything else like that, but rich interconnects have been, which peering points are the mechanism. Rich interconnects are what has made Hong Kong what it is today, made Los Angeles, New York, London, Frankfurt, and the list goes on. But I've hit the biggies right there and then. This is the win. No ifs, ands, or buts. Every telco that has run a data center near a cable landing site or whatever has never come close to touching what a carrier neutral facility has done. So if you're looking at incentivizing from a government point of view, keep that carrier neutral mindset in play. It is front and center in the world that players like myself come from. Oh, and sorry, the question, if you look at a pie chart on what we spend, spend invoice-wise with data centers around the world, and I've done this study internally, ran accounting through absolute hell to get it. The pie chart is very simple. We're nearly 2/3, but definitely more than half of our expenditure is on cross connects and interconnects with other networks or internet exchanges. It's not on power, and it's not on cabinets. It's interconnects, because that's what makes these networks operate. We interconnect with, I think, 4,000 plus networks at this point in time, and that's non-trivial to manage, but it's also non-trivial to pay for.
Can I see if I can
answer your question?
Can I just add something very quickly to that? The addition to that is a very simple point. It is almost impossible to achieve that by regulatory means. It does not matter how hard you try with non-discrimination and ex post or ex ante. You cannot achieve the same result by regulation.
Yeah, you can't.
There's one more question over here, and then I want to try and sum up because I'm very conscious of time. We've also got one more speaker who's going to try and sum up what's proving to be rather a wide-ranging discussion.
Jim Taylor from University of Highlands and Islands in Inverness. I'm one of those, I think quite a few people in the room who have come to find out what's going on but are not going to be connecting in this exchange. So we connect through Janet. One of the things we do is run a data network that covers about half of the Scottish land area, but very small percentage of the population. So I've just been, and you said you didn't know what PUE is, I've been looking at the possibility of reducing the power usage effectiveness of our server room facilities. And it's obvious to us that we can't reduce it well enough on a small scale, in small scale facilities to meet anything like our carbon management targets. So we're now beginning to plan, this is a long story, but I think it's relevant. We're looking at forward strategy so that by around 2020, we will no longer have any air-conditioned spaces of our own because they can't be efficient enough. We're already fully virtualized, so as a customer of these kinds of facilities, by 2020, I don't expect to buy rack space anywhere. I certainly don't expect to buy it in Inverness, so I think anybody commercially would be mad to build a data center in Inverness. I wouldn't invest my own money in it. But I do expect to buy cloud services that are fully virtualized. So I will not care where it is, because I'm never going there. But I do care about latency, because I'm going to access it over Janet, and it has to be very near. So it seems to me the choice is that organizations like mine will buy those cloud services data centered in London, where the latency is low, or in Manchester, or if there's interconnect in Scotland, then there's a potential for virtualization and cloud providers to sell services to me based in Scotland. And actually, I won't know where it is, and I won't care, because I'm going to consume it based on latency and price.
Would you?
But I have to go now to get home before 10 p.m. So 5 minutes.
Well, answer this quick question, because you mentioned earlier, and you're a customer of Janet, or a participant in Janet.
Yes, I'm connected through Janet.
And Janet agreed to go into Manchester?
Janet were one of the founders of Manchester, yeah.
Were the founders. So would it be obvious to say that, hypothetically, not making any assumptions over here, if there was an exchange in Scotland, that Janet would again be one of those founding, by its pure nature of what it is?
Yeah, they like the others have said, they will be there. They still need to go through an internal process of making a business case and spending money and so on, but to them it's kind of racingly obvious. Actually, there are two key individuals, neither of whom could personally be here today, otherwise we would have had Janet in the audience. Mm-hmm. They're that committed to it. Janet was actually one of the 5 LINX founders, so actually you can't find a more committed organisation to peering and to LINX than Janet. They're one of the few of the 5 founders that are actually still here in 2013. So I think that speaks volumes as well. I really do need to try and sum up, and there's a couple of points I wanted to make. So forgive me. There is still plenty of chance to ask questions, and I know that some people prefer to ask their questions in private as well. So please take advantage of the LINX staff and the LINX members that are here in the next bit and ask us anything you like. I don't want to prejudge what Mike is going to say, and he's got the space to make some independent closing remarks. So it's a good thing that someone can stand back and do that. So I'm say what you like. What I'd like to see out of it is first of all show. We've already asked you if you care to join a mailing list. Is everybody keen to do that as a result of what you've seen and heard today? Can I just get a kind of home test on that? Mm-hmm. So this is an opportunity for the discussions to carry on, the questions to carry on, the development planning, if you like, to carry on. So that's the first tangible thing we'll leave as a result of what's gone on today. We'll also build a simple website where we'll store all of the presentations that have been made. What happened with Manchester is that evolved into IX Manchester. So we used it as a place to store materials as the discussions developed. We actually had 3 meetings in fairly quick succession that got a grip on things and ended up building the exchange. So I don't know whether that will happen here, but there will at least be a mechanism that we will host, or I'll pledge to host, so that can take place. From the operators that are in the room, whether you're access or content providers, from what you've heard, are you inclined to come and connect to a Scottish exchange? Yeah, that's a reasonable show of hands, actually. And we know there are a lot more that are not here. You know, I specifically spoke to TalkTalk the other day, for example, and they've absolutely committed themselves to joining the exchanges that LINX will build. So it's not just based on the show of hands. There's more virtual hands as well as that. I'm getting the sense that you feel that we should therefore move things forward. So anyone can vote now, but do you actually think we've made a case to get going? Can I see again? Anybody still sceptical who's willing to raise their hand? That normally damps things a little bit, so apologies for that question.